My stepsister Shin Ruoming died. She died in the deep mountains of the border region. After being humiliated by debt collectors, she jumped out of the car and fled, and even her body couldn't be found. When Ji-wen found out, he built an empty grave for Shin Ruoming. Holding her memorial photo, he wept bitterly, roaring, "Why didn't you die instead, Shin Ran? It's you who killed my Ruoming." From then on, what awaited me was Ji-wen's endless domestic violence. I lost my family, was burdened with debt, and could only endure the humiliation in silence. After Ji-wen's company took my father's patented technology, it flourished even more. Everyone said he was righteous and loyal, but only I endured his abuse, eventually dying at home. When I woke up again, I saw Ji-wen arriving just after the debt collectors. I had been reborn, returning to the day when debt collectors came to our door demanding payment. 4 or 5 burly men were blocking the entrance, banging loudly on the door. Just then, the sound of a car horn was heard, and Ji-wen shouted from outside, "What are you doing? This is trespassing." It was Ji-wen, Shin Ruoming, who had been hiding in the bedroom too afraid to come out, immediately ran to open the door upon hearing his voice. In my previous life, our family was in debt, my father had disappeared, and the 3 of us, my mother, my stepsister, and I, were being harassed by debt collectors. When Ji-wen arrived, he said that the cash he had on hand was only enough to save one of us sisters, the other would have to be taken away by the debt collectors. Years ago, when the Ji family fell into decline, my father, out of respect for their long-standing friendship, arranged my engagement to Ji-wen and helped them revive their business. Our engagement was trending online for 3 days and 3 nights, but he ended up having an affair with my stepsister, Shin Ruoming, at the time, unaware of the truth. I thought he had come specifically to save me and threw myself into his arms, crying. He was forced to rescue me. Back then, I had no idea how high a price I would pay for it later. He promised Shin Ruoming that once his funds were in order, he would definitely come to rescue her. At the time, I was deeply moved, thinking he was a responsible person who, out of gratitude to the Shin family, wouldn't abandon anyone. A week later, to Ji-wen's shock, the police informed him that Shin Ruoming had been taken to the border by debt collectors. There, they attempted to assault her, and in an effort to protect herself, she jumped from the vehicle and fled, ultimately dying deep in the mountains, despite a joint search operation by multiple departments. Her body was never found. Heartbroken, Ji-wen personally led a team to search the mountains, but they still came up empty-handed. Returning home, he unleashed all his pain and resentment on me, grabbing me by the throat so tightly I could barely breathe. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't pressured me into the engagement, I would have gone to save Ruoming. The one I love is Ruoming. I promised to protect her for a lifetime. Why couldn't it have been you, Shin Ran, who died? You're the one who killed my Ruoming." After being verbally abused and beaten by him all night, I still had to attend the funeral he held for Shin Ruoming the next day, in front of all the media. He made no effort to hide his grief, yet he was utterly cold toward me. Everyone believed that Shin Ruoming was the one he truly loved, while I became the villain who tore them apart, despised by all. But no one knew that Ji-wen's success today was entirely due to my father and me attracting investments for his family's company. No one knew that when he was kidnapped abroad, it was my money and efforts that saved him. And no one knew that while he and my father were building their careers overseas, I was the one diligently caring for his sick mother. When his mother was hospitalized for surgery, I arranged for the most renowned doctors and covered the exorbitant medical and surgical expenses. The public may not know these things, but how could Ji-wen forget? Unfortunately, a beast never knows gratitude. His personal involvement in the mountain search and his tears at the funeral earned him widespread sympathy, with countless online comments praising his devotion. But at night, he beat me again, leaving me battered and bleeding. He smashed my phone so I couldn't call for help and locked me out on the balcony. "Ruoming is dead. She died in your place. Why do you get to live, you cowardly, selfish wretch, Shin Ran? Just die," locked on the balcony. The physical pain left me with no strength to struggle. If I had known it would end like this, I would never have begged Ji-wen to save me. So in this life, when I saw Ji-wen again, I didn't rush toward him, nor did I mention that he was my fiancé. Instead, Shun Ruoming, standing beside me, put on a pitiful act, looking up at him with tearful eyes and biting her lip as she silently cried. She glanced at me, and seeing that I remained silent, she cried even more pathetically. Ji Wen immediately stepped in front of Shun Ruoming. Ruoming is in poor health. Whatever amount of money you want, I'll pay it. A crowd of onlookers had long gathered at my doorstep, with small-time live streamers broadcasting the scene. After all, it wasn't every day you got to witness a wealthy family like the Shun family go bankrupt and get chased for debts. People were buzzing with gossip. Wasn't it the eldest Shun daughter who got engaged to President Ji? Why is he trying to save the second daughter instead? What second daughter? Shun Ruoming is just an illegitimate child. Mrs. Shun kindly took her in back then. But who would have thought she'd end up causing trouble for her own daughter? Didn't you hear just now? President Ji called her Ruoming, so intimately. What else do you need to know about their relationship? This is clearly the fiancé getting involved with the sister, a total family scandal. Ji Wen turned and pulled Shun Ruoming into his arms, completely ignoring the surrounding whispers. They held each other tightly. His eyes were filled with heartache as he looked at her. The cameras of reporters and streamers quickly focused on them. They actually dared to act so shamelessly right in front of his fiancée. My mother trembled with rage and stepped forward to confront Ji Wen. Ji Wen, the one you're engaged to is Ran Ran. The one who's been taking care of your mother all along is Ran Ran. Now that our Shun family is being chased for debts and your father-in-law has gone missing, instead of helping your own fiancé, you're openly having an affair. Have you no conscience? Ji Wen's company only survived thanks to my father's help. It was by following my father abroad in his early years that he gained the skills he has today, but now, he's completely indifferent to my father's disappearance. Only thinking of taking Shun Ruoming away. In my past life, I begged him to help me find my father. With the Ji family's resources back then, searching abroad might have been more effective than the local police, but I died without ever seeing any results. Faced with the crowd's gossip and my mother's questioning, before Ji Wen could speak, Shun Ruoming's eyes welled up with tears. She pitifully let go of Ji Wen and said, "Auntie, I know you look down on me. Ah Wen, you should go save my sister instead. I'm not worthy." As she spoke, she slowly moved away from him. Ji Wen grabbed her arm, the last trace of guilt in his eyes vanishing. He glared at me fiercely and said, "This is my money. I'll save whoever I want. Spare me the moral blackmail." With that, ignoring everyone's attempts to stop him, he turned and walked away, pulling Shun Ruoming along. My mother, unable to contain her anger, tried to go after them, but I stopped her. "Ji Wen, stop right there." Ji Wen turned back, thinking I was going to cling to him. His face full of disgust. "Shun Ran, I will save you, but not now, you'd better." I let out a cold laugh, not wanting to hear another word of his hypocrisy. "I don't need you to save me. I just want to ask you one thing. Since you're engaged to me, why are you messing around with my sister?" Ji Wen's face darkened. "Out of respect for your mother as an elder, I won't say much, but Shun Ran, how dare you spout such nonsense?" Shun Ruoming chimed in. "Sister, I didn't. Am I talking nonsense?" "Ji Wen, you know the answer in your heart." Without waiting for his retort, I turned my attack directly toward Shun Ruoming. "Little sister, there's no need to act so innocent. If you were truly pure and kind-hearted, would you have sneaked around with my fiancé behind my back? Your hypocritical, green tea act makes me sick." As soon as my words fell, Shun Ruoming looked as if she had suffered a grave injustice, her shoulders trembling as she began to cry. Ji Wen held her lie. Glaring at me with fury, "Shun Ran, I'm the one who wants to save Ruoming. There's no need for you to be so sarcastic here. I always thought you were a sensible person, but it seems I was wrong." His words, "it seems I was wrong," not only negated all my efforts over the past few years but also negated me as a person. Overwhelming hatred made my chest heave violently. I suppressed the disgust in my heart. "Since you detest me so much, let's call off the engagement today in front of all these media outlets, and you must repay every expense I incurred during our engagement." "You want to call off the engagement?" Ji Wen was clearly caught off guard by my sudden proposal. "That's right," I said firmly. not only am I breaking off the engagement with you, but I also demand that you repay every single expense I covered for you during our engagement. From the small costs like your daily living expenses to the larger ones, like your mother's surgery and medical fees when she was sick, and even the investments my Shin family made in your company, you have to pay back every last penny. I've roughly calculated it to be around 2 to 3 million. Although it's not enough to cover all the debts, it should be sufficient to cover the interest. Ji Wen grew frantic, his face turning red and veins bulging on his forehead. Shin ran. Don't go too far, go too far. I smiled indifferently. In my past life, because you saved me, I could overlook these material things. But for Shin Ruoming, you beat me, humiliated me, and even stood by watching me die. I may not have the ability to seek revenge for that grudge yet. But I absolutely won't let a scumbag like you keep these material benefits. Shin Ruoming immediately chimed in, playing the role of the villain who strikes first. Sister, how can you ask for gifts back once they've been given? Besides, you know perfectly well that Wen is already struggling just to save me. Are you trying to push him to his death? Since our marriage is hopeless, according to the law, I have every right to demand this money back. If you don't believe me, go ask a lawyer. I stared coldly at Shin Ruoming. You've been to university. After all, even if you don't understand the law, you should have some basic sense of morality, right? What's wrong with me asking for my own money back? Besides, isn't this better for you? Once the money is repaid, there will be no engagement or financial entanglements between Ji Wen and me. You can smoothly marry him and comfortably become a wealthy wife, of course. If President Ji is unwilling to repay the money, I cast a cold glance at them and addressed the onlookers. I implore everyone here to help spread the word about the actions of this freeloader, President Ji. And let his business partners see what kind of person he truly is. As soon as my words fell, someone in the crowd burst out laughing. Even those fierce debt collectors weren't in a hurry to chase the debt anymore, waiting to watch the drama unfold. Shin Ruoming's eyes flickered with calculation. Yet she still wore a timid expression as she looked at Ji Wen. Ji Wen glared at me with increasing disgust, probably because I had publicly insulted and threatened him, offending his fragile ego. Your father is already on the list of dishonest persons. Even if I repay the money now, who's to say you won't just take the money and run? Unable to win the argument with reason, he started slinging mud at me. My father is missing, not a deadbeat, I immediately retorted. Everyone knows my father is the founder of a leading tech company. Over the years, Shin Corporation has dedicated itself to public welfare and has done countless things beneficial to society. Everyone has seen it. Then, I announced loudly, I have decided to sell Shin Corporation's latest technological advancements at a low price, hoping to overcome this crisis. Hearing this, the crowd immediately erupted. A starved camel is still bigger than a horse. Although no one knew exactly what technology one was referring to, Shin Corporation's past achievements in the tech field were too dazzling for anyone to resist such a temptation. Wang's technology has entered the live stream and started asking for prices. Boss Liu is here too. They're sending people over right away. In my previous life, I guarded my father's lifelong technological achievements and handed them over to Ji Wen without reservation. But after he obtained the core technology and heard about Shin Ruoming's death, he showed me no mercy. I gave him everything from the Shin family, only to be repaid with torment and insults. In this life, I will fight for myself, for my family, and for my parents, if I remember correctly. At this time in my previous life, sitting in the black luxury car not far from us was Liang Buyan, the boss of Liang Corporation, Shin Corporation's competitor who had been closely watching us. Liang Buyan was about the same age as Ji Wen but was a self-made ruthless individual with a mysterious background. No one knew who his powerful financial backer was. He was no paper tiger like Ji Wen and certainly had ample funds to acquire Shin Corporation's patented technology. In my previous life, he had also sent people to probe whether I was willing to sell the technology. At that time, I firmly believed Ji Wen would help the Shin family out of trouble and saw them as opportunists, so I drove them away. Now, he has become my last lifeline. Yesterday, I righteously drove his people away, but today I'm publicly auctioning off the technology. I wonder how Liang Buyan will see me now, but I have no way back anymore. In my previous life, Jiwen chose me, reaping both the benefits of the core technology and the reputation of helping in times of need, thriving in the business world. In this life, I will make sure he loses both fame and fortune. Shenran. This is the work of your uncle's entire lifetime. How can you bear to hand it over to outsiders? Jiwen probably sensed my determination and softened his tone. I know you're angry that I saved Shen Ruomeng first, but rest assured, I will also break off the engagement and return the money. I cut him off directly. Upon hearing this, Jiwen's face twisted with rage, and he threatened me word by word. Shenran, don't forget, the debt collectors are planning to take you to the border. You know how chaotic the border is. I haven't forgotten the pain he inflicted on me in my previous life. I swung my arm and slapped him several times in a row. So hard he nearly lost his balance, my eyes bloodshot. I roared, "You beast, what right do you have to call that my father's life's work, when your Ji family went bankrupt? Have you forgotten who helped you make a comeback? Now that my father is missing, you haven't sent anyone to look for him. Nor are you willing to help us repay the debts. Instead, you're here threatening my safety. You heartless monster." My words painted Jiwen as a heartless scoundrel, reminiscent of Chen Shimai. Even the debt collectors looked at him with disdain. "How dare you hit me?" Jiwen instinctively raised his hand to strike back. Just then, a loud voice came from behind the crowd. "The police are here, soon." The crowd parted, and 2 police officers approached us. Jiwen immediately lowered his hand, and the debt collectors obediently stepped aside. "Why is there such a large crowd gathered here, causing a disturbance?" The senior officer at the front looked at us sternly. "Misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. We were just discussing the repayment." The debt collector pulled out the contract in his hand. It clearly states the borrower and the repayment date. This is a legitimate lending relationship. Their family defaulted on the debt past the contract deadline. We are law-abiding citizens, and everything is reasonable and legal. The police examined the contract several times, confirming it was a standard high-interest loan, and then asked Jiwen, "Who are you?" Jiwen immediately replied, "I am the son-in-law of the debtor, Shenran's fiancé. I'm here to help repay the debt, but I don't have enough money to cover it all, so I can only save one person." The contract stated that if the debtor was unable to repay the loan, the debtor and their family members would have to repay it through labor. "Officer, he is not my fiancé." I straightened my back. Although Jiwen and I were engaged, he is now cheating with my younger sister. Our engagement is no longer valid. All financial expenses during the engagement period should be returned to me, but he is now refusing to repay. I hope the officer can help me recover my personal property. The police looked at Jiwen, who quickly denied it. "We just had an argument." Everything she said was out of anger. The onlookers who witnessed the entire scene were not going to play along with his act. They shouted, "He's lying, Uncle Police. Make him return the money, cheating man. Return the money, gold digger, return the money." The police quickly tried to maintain order. "Quiet, everyone, quiet." Then they said, "Since this is a private matter between you, we won't intervene, but you can't gather such a large crowd. It affects the city's appearance and safety. Everyone, please disperse." However, how could the onlookers let such a drama slip away? Especially the small-time streamers, whose live broadcasts usually only attracted a few hundred viewers. Today, each of their streams had surged to over 100,000 viewers. The crowd refused to disperse, and the police had no choice but to stay to prevent any conflicts from breaking out. For a moment, the scene reached a stalemate. At that moment, Liang Buyan, who had been quietly watching from a distance, finally made his appearance. His assistant cleared a path for him, and he walked straight up to me. "Miss Shen, earlier you mentioned selling the core technology of the Shen Group. Is that offer still valid?" "Of course it is," I replied immediately, "but I won't accept anyone taking advantage of the situation. The minimum must be enough for me to repay my debts." "Don't worry, the Liang Group has always respected Mr. Shen. We would never do such a thing," Liang Buyan said straightforwardly. Seeing this, Jiwen immediately stopped Liang Buyan. "President Liang, What are you doing here? You can't do this. Only Uncle Shin has the right to sell the core technology of Shin Corporation. I had long expected him to say this, so I took out the technology transfer certificate my father had given me before his disappearance. Do I have the right now? If the police hadn't been present, I would have slapped the certificate right in his face. Ji Wen snatched the transfer document, flipping through it page by page, his face full of disbelief. How is this possible? This can't be. Liang Buyan was very straightforward. He took out a check, wrote down the amount of my debt, and handed it to the debt collector. However, the money was only enough to free me. It wasn't enough to release my mother. I looked at my mother with concern and was about to ask Liang Buyan to save her too, but she shook her head. All right, now that part of your debt is resolved, what about your engagement issue? The police turned to Ji Wen. Ji Wen glared at Liang Buyan and me with resentment, gritting his teeth and saying, I won't call off the engagement. I knew exactly what he was thinking. With the Shin family in trouble, if he were to break off the engagement now, he would surely face criticism. Moreover, I had publicly asked him for money. If he broke off the engagement without paying, he would be ridiculed as ungrateful, something he absolutely could not accept, and since I had dared to hit him earlier, he was surely plotting how to teach me a lesson after marriage. Seeing Ji Wen's unwavering stance, my heart grew colder. Ji Wen was selfish, untrustworthy, and always weighed the pros and cons before making any decision. Even though he had taken advantage, he still expected me to accept it with a smile. How heartless. With tears in my eyes, I turned to the police and the onlookers. Everyone here, I'm not asking Ji Wen to repay my family's debt. I only want him to return the money I spent on him after our engagement. I won't even ask for the expenses without receipts. Just the 2 million for my mother's medical bills. What? 2 million? You're asking for too much. Shen Ruoming instinctively raised her voice, drawing disapproving looks from the police and the crowd. I cursed her inwardly for being a fool. Do you know what has kept old Mrs. G alive all these years? I raised my voice and said, it's the best medical facilities in the country, the top doctors, and the most expensive medicines from home and abroad. I paid for all of it, year after year, day after day, for 3 whole years. And you still think I'm asking for too much? I cast a mocking glance at Ji Wen, who was still in shock, and this freeloading man has spent my money in more ways than one. 2 years ago, when he was kidnapped by gangsters abroad and the ransom was 3 million, I paid twice that amount to hire mercenaries to rescue him. I was even worried the local gangs wouldn't let him go, so I bribed the local bosses with dozens of gold bars to ensure his safety. Tell me, isn't all that worth 3 million? 3 million, that's not nearly enough. The police officer looked at me with a complicated expression. Silly girl, do you want me to find you a basket? I looked at him blankly. The officer continued, go dig for wild vegetables. You've got a natural talent for it. You're even more devoted than Wang Baochuan. I knew he was referring to my past tendency to be overly infatuated. Liang Buyan chimed in at the right moment. If Mr. G has any objections to this, I can hire a lawyer to help Miss Shen calculate the total amount. I assure you, Mr. G won't be shortchanged. Although Ji Wen was reluctant, the crowd was already outraged, and he had no choice but to agree to repay the money. However, the look he gave me was like a poisoned arrow, as if he wished it could pierce right through me. He probably never imagined that someone like me, who was about to be taken away by debt collectors for hard labor, could have such a significant impact on his company and reputation. In the end, Ji Wen left with Shun Ruoming, humiliated and pointed at by the onlookers, with Liang Buyan and his bodyguards present. The debt collectors didn't dare step forward to rush me. I didn't notice that my mother had already walked up to Liang Buyan and bowed deeply. Mr. Liang, I can see that you are a kind person. Please, I beg you, help our Shen family. My husband is definitely not the type to evade his debts. Mom. Seeing the white hair on her head as she bowed, the tears I had been holding back finally streamed down my face. I also bowed to Liang Buyan. Mr. Liang, I know we're being shameless by asking this, but you're the only one who can help us now. I want to clear my father's name. He has always been law-abiding and would never abandon us and run away. Please, can you help us find someone abroad, even if it's just his body? My mother and I will accept it. In my previous life, my father and Ji-wen went abroad together to inspect a factory, but they encountered a riot. After Dad made a call to reassure us, he went missing. Ji-wen returned to the country and claimed to have lost contact with my father. Shortly after, the Shun Group's stock market crashed, and the company went bankrupt overnight, with creditors swarming in, from the bankruptcy to my family being taken away by debt collectors, and eventually to my death at the hands of Ji-wen. It all happened within just 2 months. The details had long been blurred by fear, but now, thinking calmly, it seems there was something I overlooked. I must stay. Only by remaining alive in the capital can I uncover the truth. Mr. Liang, I know you only want to buy the technology of the Shun Group, I said, choking back tears. Please forgive my shamelessness, but if you can't help me find my father, I'll have no choice but to raise the price for the technology. Liang Buyan helped my mother and me to our feet. My eyes were already filled with tears, making it impossible to see his expression clearly, clinging to a sliver of hope. I prayed that this mysterious Mr. Liang would lend a helping hand. Mr. Liang, I beg you. The surroundings fell into silence, and even the reporters and small-time streamers went quiet. I don't know how much time passed before I heard a sigh. I understand, Liang Buyan said, looking at me. Mr. Shun is a respected senior of mine, and his disappearance is full of unanswered questions. As a junior, it is only right for me to offer assistance. I will mobilize all my overseas resources to conduct a full-scale search and rescue for Mr. Shun. Upon hearing this, my mother was so overwhelmed with emotion that she wanted to kneel before Liang Buyan. I quickly held her back. I finally stayed. On the day I was originally supposed to be taken away by debt collectors, I chose to remain in the capital. This time, I no longer had to rely on Ji-wen, serve others day in and day out, endure humiliation and abuse, or face a brutal death. The house and car had already been seized by the court to pay off debts. I handed over all my jewelry to the debt collectors, hoping they would spare my mother and me and stop harassing us. To my surprise, the debt collectors were surprisingly honorable and actually returned my jewelry. Miss Shun, you've misunderstood us. We're legitimate debt collectors. We don't do anything shady. I was quite taken aback. If they had been this considerate in my previous life, why would Shun Ruoming have chosen to jump from a moving car to escape? Who was lying? I didn't want to rely on Liang Buyan, so I turned down the hotel he arranged and found a cheap youth hostel to settle my mother in. Before it got dark, I slipped back into the house through the back door that had always been locked. Looking at the familiar plants and scenery, I finally couldn't hold back and burst into tears, but I never expected Ji-wen to be so despicable. At night, I groggily opened my eyes and happened to see Ji-wen holding a fruit knife suspended above my throat. He wanted to kill me. In my previous life, Ji-wen had become increasingly violent because of Shun Ruoming's death, often hitting me, so I had always been particularly alert while sleeping. Waking up the moment I sensed someone nearby. At this moment, Ji-wen was dressed in black, glaring at me with a fierce expression. Awake, I never thought you'd manage to stay in the capital without my help. I underestimated you. I lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at him expressionlessly. Ji-wen, is this your true face? A worthless coward who only stabs people in the back. Shut up. Ji-wen clamped his hand over my mouth and dragged me to the floor. If you had obediently followed the debt collectors and waited for me to rescue you, I wouldn't have had to do this to you. I admit, I still felt a bit of pity for you. After all, you used to take care of my mother, and we were engaged, but now you've publicly called off the engagement and even asked me for money, humiliating me completely. The angrier he got, the more vicious his eyes became. As long as you're dead, my past won't be brought up again, and I can marry Shun Ruoming openly and honestly. I secretly pinched the flesh on my thigh, and tears immediately welled up in my eyes, choking back sobs. I said, Ji-wen, we grew up together, and my father was your teacher, yet for Shun Ruoming, you would actually kill me. A woman's tears are the best weapon. I cried pitifully, gasping for breath as I collapsed against him. The moment he was stunned, I flicked my wrist without hesitation, snatched the fruit knife, and plunged it into his chest. "Ah, you bitch, you ambushed me." Ji-wen slapped me, and I rolled aside, not a single tear left on my face. "Ji-wen, if I were you, I wouldn't make a move right now," I said coldly. "After all, if this knife were to pierce your heart, how long do you think you'd survive? If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have held back just now. I had precisely controlled the angle and force of the fruit knife. Ji-wen wouldn't die. But it was enough to render him unable to resist." Ji-wen lay on the ground, clutching his chest tightly, not daring to move. "If we're talking about being despicable, I'm nowhere near you," I said. Looking at him, "You could stand by and watch your own teacher get framed without doing a thing. Either you're inherently cold-blooded, or you have ulterior motives. Ji-wen, which one is it?" Ji-wen's pupils suddenly contracted, and a flicker of panic crossed his face, but it vanished almost instantly. He scrambled to his feet and fled in a disheveled state. I stood quietly in the darkness, biting my lip hard, letting the taste of blood spread in my mouth. My suspicions were right. Ji-wen was indeed connected to my father's disappearance. From the moment I was reborn until now, I've been replaying the events of my past life. In my previous life, after Ji-wen saved me, I instinctively saw him as someone I could rely on. I took care of his sick mother, helped him manage his company, and even asked him to secretly investigate the truth behind my father's framing and the mastermind behind it. But until the day I died, Ji-wen never uncovered any clues. Instead, during those 2 months, his fortunes turned, and he became the new rising star in the capital, someone everyone wanted to cozy up to. Later, when I was locked on the balcony, I overheard him on the phone mentioning, "Li Luo is very grateful to him and has provided him with more funding." Thinking back now, Li Luo has always been the biggest competitor of the Shun Group and is widely known in the industry for being ruthless. How could Ji-wen have any connection with him? It turns out everything was premeditated. I was just too naive back then. The next day, I went to the Liang Corporation, Liang Buyan, and I talked in his office for nearly 2 hours. When I left his company, my eyes were red. "I'm helping you not just for the Shun family's core technology, but also because I regret your wasted talent," Liang Buyan said to me. "If you hadn't withdrawn from the Shun Group's management after getting engaged to Ji-wen, the Shun family wouldn't be in such a sorry state today. It was your family who let the wolf in through the door. I hope you can pull yourself together. If you're willing, the Liang Corporation welcomes you." He said a lot, and it moved me deeply, making me unable to hold back my tears. I remembered how I once wanted to help my father develop the company and how I was once his chosen successor, but I was deceived by Ji-wen, thinking I could rely on him, and in the end, I fell into hell. I adjusted my emotions and returned to the youth hostel, never expecting to run into Shun Ruoming at the intersection. Although she was dressed glamorously today, the bruises under her eyes were very noticeable. "Sister, I finally found you." Shun Ruoming approached me. "Ji-wen is injured and hospitalized, and has been unconscious. Old Mrs. Ji's condition has also worsened, and she's incredibly stubborn. She refuses to let any caregivers look after her." I went to beg that retired old doctor, but he wouldn't even see me. That doctor was my father's longtime friend, and after the news of how Ji-wen bullied you spread, why would he still be willing to treat them? "What does this have to do with me?" I interrupted her. "You can't handle it after just one night. When you marry Ji-wen, there will be plenty more days like this." I turned to leave, but she stopped me. "Sister, my health isn't good either, and I really can't take care of 2 patients. Please. For the sake of our past relationship, save Ji-wen." I found it laughable. "I can't save him, but there is someone who can." "Who?" Shun Ruoming asked urgently. "Li Luo," I said, looking at her. "Ji-wen is too proud to go to Li Luo himself, but you can." Shun Ruoming's eyes lit up, but she hesitated. "Isn't Li Luo a rival of the Shun family? He is indeed powerful, but would it be appropriate for me to go to him?" "So what? The fact that Ji-wen has broken with the Shun family is already common knowledge." I sneered. "I've heard that Li Luo's net worth is much higher than Ji-wen's. With his help, what kind of doctor couldn't you find? But if you go rashly, he definitely won't see you." "But what?" Shun Ruoming pressed anxiously. I smiled and said, but Ji Wen and Li Luo are good friends. If you go to see him as Ji Wen's fiancé, Li Luo will definitely meet with you. With that, I turned and left. I know Shen Ruoming all too well. She relies on her beauty and is arrogant. Ji Wen isn't her best option. If she meets a man with better status, position, and looks, she wouldn't hesitate to dump Ji Wen. All I need to do is send someone to wait outside Li Luo's company and let her walk right into the trap. 2 days later, I saw Liang Buyan again. This time, he was accompanied by police officers specializing in overseas missing persons cases. They informed me that Li Luo was highly suspected in my father's disappearance case. Just yesterday, the police had secretly launched a full investigation, and both Li Luo's side and the hospital where Ji Wen was located were placed under surveillance. If Ji Wen really framed Mr. Shun to monopolize the Shun Group's technology, the law will definitely bring justice to your family. I bowed in gratitude, praying in my heart for this calamity to pass quickly. 3 more days passed. And I heard that outside Li Luo's company, the police caught a suspicious woman. After interrogation and search, they unexpectedly found a secret contract on her detailing financial transactions between Ji Wen and Li Luo. The truth was getting closer. Amid the tense atmosphere, a month went by. During this month, I worked in the Liang Group's laboratory testing the Shun family's former technological assets while maintaining contact with Liang Buyan. Until one afternoon, I received a call from the police. At the station, I finally saw my exhausted father and learned the whole story. It turned out that during the days of his disappearance, my father had been kidnapped by gangsters hired by Li Luo. They forced him to reveal his bank safe deposit box password, severed the company's funding chain, maliciously saddled him with high-interest loans, and ultimately brought down the Shun Group. My father was framed precisely because he discovered Ji Wen's illegal activities. Fortunately, my father had been cautious all along and managed to escape back from overseas. In the end, Ji Wen and Li Luo were arrested by the police for kidnapping, malicious competition, and illegal fundraising. Relevant authorities also uncovered their illicit funds and tax evasion schemes. Ji Wen's wrongdoings were soon exposed by the media, completely ruining his reputation. Our family's life has finally returned to normal. I officially joined the Liang Corporation and spend my days immersed in laboratory research. My father has also energetically restarted his company. I hadn't thought about Ji Wen and Shun Ruoming for a long time, until Liang Buyan came to me with news. Shun Ruoming had been beaten to death by Ji Wen in the hospital. I heard that while Ji Wen was beating her, he kept shouting wrong, saying things shouldn't be like this, I should be the CEO, not a criminal, and even yelling if Shun Ruoming hadn't blown me up in our previous life, I wouldn't have done these things I'll regret for a lifetime. Ji Wen begged the police to see me, but I refused. Later, I heard he committed suicide in prison, but I don't care about any of that anymore. I just want to live with dignity, together with my family. That's all for today's story. If you've listened this far, please leave a comment saying happy every day to wish everyone happiness every day.